Hi, Gratitude Seeker. Welcome to a new episode of the Gratitude Podcast. Today, with me, I have an amazing person with an inspiring story. I love how present and how empathetic he is, and just how he managed to bring from a difficult life situation something wonderful that he wants to share with you, with me, with the world, and to actually help us be more appreciative of the people that we have in our life, and our close people and the ones that we care about. I'm really happy to introduce Connor James. He is, like I said, an amazing person. He's doing some amazing work, but I will let him tell you more about what he is about and what he is doing in this world.
Yeah, Georgie, and I'm so grateful just to be here with you and your listeners. And I think that a lot of times in life we hear maybe, oh, what if that person was erased, or what if they were gone, things would be differently. And you mentioned the experience that I've gone through, and we can talk about that a little bit later. But what I'm passionate about, and why I'm so grateful to be with your listeners and for the work that you're doing, is just bringing urgency to relationships and helping people understand that it all can change in a moment, in the snap of the fingers. And my company that I've founded is all about taking the time that we have and leveraging it to create more intentional moments and to create more meaning in those important relationships. So just grateful to be here today, and look forward to our conversation.
Lovely, lovely. So let us know a little bit about your company as well.
Yes, it's called Meaningful Books, and sometimes people struggle to connect. Like I said, there's so many things going on. A quote that I heard recently is, "We eat on the go, we sleep on the go, we're always on the go, and then we wonder, where did our life go?" And my company, we've designed a proven process that's helping people connect in their relationships, and we're helping them with written words. So like I said, we leverage the time. If you said, I'm going to allocate X amount of time, you sat down to do it, we're going to help that page fill itself with intentional words for an important person in your relationship. So if you sat down by yourself to do it, my strong argument and my commitment to you is that you're going to fill that page with much more meaning and intentionality than you would with the support of our writing guides, because we ask you specific questions that help you connect with a moment in time or a future moment with whether it be a significant other, a parent, a child, a sibling. So we've got these specific guides that help you fill a 15-page journal and really make those memories last forever.
This is wonderful. And we will get into the power of asking intentional questions in a bit. But firstly, let us know a little bit about your background and the story that you shared with me as well. I think
Yeah,
it can be really inspiring for all of us.
absolutely. Yeah, when I was a teenager, I was 13 years old, and life was pretty normal. I had two brothers, grew up in a small Midwestern town in the United States, in Illinois. And my dad was the sole income provider of our family. He took me to basketball practice early one morning. Can still remember, the coffee he was drinking. It was a cold winter morning. Got to basketball. He dropped me off, and that was that. I had a great practice, and following practice, somebody else picked me up. I was intending for him to pick me up. It didn't throw me off very much, but someone else picked me up, took me back to my house, and that's when I realized, there were some other people, some family friends at our home, and it didn't register yet. I went up to my room. My mother asked my brothers and I, my two brothers, to go up to our room, and Moments later, she took us downstairs, and that's when I knew right away that something had happened. And she told my brothers and I, with my grandmother was sitting there, my dad's mom, that my dad had had a massive heart attack and passed away. And so he was
Hmm.
46 years old,
Oh my God.
and you just can't really, the shock and the emotions of that initial moment, you can replay it in your mind. And I think that everybody handles things like that differently. But when I say that there was truly no goodbyes, there was no opportunity to say anything. There wasn't. And just like that, our lives have changed forever. And now I'm trying to use that in a positive way.
So what did you feel then? Like, I mean, were there things that you would have loved for him to know or something like this?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think you don't think about some of those things later, but even just how much he meant to me, and things that probably he didn't even know that I wish he would have known. And yeah, that opportunity was stolen. It was taken away in a moment. And the emotion for me, I think I was just in shock. I didn't cry right away. I think it didn't seem real for a really long time, until you had that basketball game or you had that baseball game, and you looked up and just your mom was sitting there. That was probably when, over time, and you started to realize it. So
Yeah, I can imagine. I can imagine. Um, I think one important thing here is that we can talk about is, for instance, for us guys to um, it may be seen as something kind of cheesy to let people know, especially when it's a guy thing, to let them know about your feelings, about what you appreciate about that person. And I think that this is important to change. It's important for us to do that as well. From what I know, women usually do this easier. Um, usually, I mean, when the relationship is okay. Um, but it's something that we can work on as well as guys, right?
hmm yeah, I think as men we struggle a little bit more to put those things out there. It's a little bit more natural to not want to do it. And Georgian, we're at a time where men or women, um, there's so many distractions now. There's not there's not time to sit down and think about those things. We're not even giving ourselves the bandwidth or the margin to even focus on what we do appreciate about people in our lives. And that's what's scary for me, and that's why I'm so grateful to be, hopefully, my biggest goal for listeners of this podcast, or anybody that encounters anything I do, is that I hope that they go home tonight, and they make that phone call, or they put the phone in the drawer and they lock it up for the night, and they sit down with their wife or their kid, and they create more of those moments. That's really my mission, I guess, if you will.
Hmm. So, what does gratitude mean for you personally? How do you see gratitude?
Yeah, I was a college football player here in Southern Illinois. And so this may sound a little bit odd, but gratitude to me is going to practice every day. It has to be a part of your makeup and your disciplined approach to life, because you can't just wake up and say, this is what I'm grateful for. And I've learned this over time, and I still have so much to learn. But gratitude to me means that you are intentional about focusing on what you appreciate. Because if you don't, you won't be prepared for those moments later on, and you won't ever get to a state of full being really grateful.
I totally agree. It's something that we, if we do, we have it as a tool. We have it as something that keeps us going when things get harder. Because when it's really easy to be grateful and when things are great, it's important to be grateful then as well. But it's even more helpful when things aren't going that great to be able to have this as a habit, as a way of keeping it together somehow.
Absolutely.
But what do you do when it's hard to be grateful? Like when it's really not the first thing that you think about when things are getting harder in life.
Mhm. Well, I think you just said it. You have to stay the course, and you have to keep putting in the work. And for me, I have a daily gratitude practice of just three things from the previous day that I appreciate, and those can be the most simple things. And I think you get to that later. You're going to ask me about that, but it, when things are really hard, that's the time where you have to focus in on um, on what is good, number one. And then number two, I think I ask people this question. I go around and I do speaking occasionally, and I got a chance to be in front of a group a couple weeks ago, and I said, you have to change your perspective. And so ask yourself the question, does somebody else have it worse than me right now? And I think no matter what your circumstance is, there is somebody else out there that's going through something worse. And a lot of times we forget that. We get in our own zone and in our own world. And so that question in and of itself, when things are really bad, and that may seem, that's not saying I'm not sympathetic or empathetic to what someone's going through, but I'm just trying to help them reset their mindset.
I love this question, and I love the fact that it gets you to feel grateful, but in a different way. Like you don't ask what are you grateful for. You get to see one of the most useful things when coming to gratitude is to uh, experience or to think about contrast. Like if you have any possibility of experiencing contrast, for instance, if you go in a really poor neighborhood or country, you definitely appreciate the things that you have back at home in a totally different at a totally different level. But if you yeah
I was going to say on that point, it's like people, exactly. You go on a mission trip or you experience something that it it sets your perspective again. It resets that perspective. Oh wow, things are okay. But guess what happens, Georgian, over time? If you're out of that element, you drift back towards the comfort level and the level of things that could potentially lead you to forget why you should be grateful.
exactly, and it's just a way of our our brain wants us to feel protected and to not worry about the things that are going great, and it just puts them in the background. But it's our job to get them to the foreground and to appreciate them, because if we don't, we only focus on those things that are possible threats, that are taking our attention, that are important for survival, but that don't make us too happy. So yeah, this has been my experience, and in the research that I've done on gratitude, this is what I found. But um, do you have like a favorite quote on gratitude?
It's again, it's a little bit more of a contrasting quote, I guess. But I think it's we have three choices when things go bad. We can let those things destroy us, define us, or develop us. And I can't remember who said that, but that one sticks with me. So every time there's a circumstance of something that goes wrong, for instance, when my dad passed away, I could have let that, I could still be clinging to that experience and saying, I grew up from the time I was 13 without a dad. Just let me be grumpy. Um, I'm mad at the world. Or I can take that experience, and I could have let it destroy me too. I can take that experience and use it as something that's developed me and molded me into who I am today.
Yeah, I love this because we all have bad experiences of some sort. And of course, for ourselves, the worst ones are the ones that are closest to us and that we experience. But in other ways, there have been other people that have had these kinds of experiences, and some of them found a way, like you said, to grow from them. Because one example that I love to give is, for instance, Anthony Robbins or Oprah. Even they had really harsh experiences when they were younger or in their childhood, and somehow they found a way to rise from that and to develop, to grow, and to actually have a positive impact in the world. So it is actually a matter of choice, even though it might not seem so when you are in that particular situation and all of those feelings come to the surface, right?
Hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, I think there's story after story of individuals like that, and that's what I'm always interested in too. Is I think you mentioned people that are at the peak of the mountain, and people that are so visible now, and they're helping thousands upon thousands of people. And what I'm interested in is you and I walk by people every single day, and the listeners that are listening to this podcast, they do as well, and they probably are these people that are finding ways to overcome those moments right now. And so that's a little bit of what I do on my podcast is I take ordinary people and I say, how have you gotten through this? And they're not a superstar, they're not on cover of magazines, but I'm interested in their stories too.
I love it. I love it. And let's get back to the questions, the power of questions. I love this, and I think the questions can direct our focus and our actual experience of life. I actually had an episode recently about beginning with the question, why am I so unhappy? And I really asked this question for quite a while, for years, and uh, not this exact question, but questions that were related to this. And I found many answers, many reasons, many. I could understand, for instance, from an emotional intelligence perspective, from an astrological perspective, from a spiritual perspective. So, all kinds of perspectives, and I did learn a lot from this. But if we only ask better questions like, what can I do to be happy? Um, what makes me happy and I didn't do for a while, or something like this, it actually shifts your perspective and it gets you to feel that, to experience that, instead of just understanding why is this happening to me or why is this happening. So I really believe in the power of questions, and I would love to hear your perspective.
Absolutely. I have two thoughts. Well, the first one is the world happening to me or am I happening to the world? And that the questions and the narrative that you play in your mind that you build into your daily life can direct those circumstances. For my wife and I, it could be really easy for her to come home and for me to say, "Oh, how was your day today?" And I think naturally we're designed to maybe talk about or reflect on things that didn't go well or that were hard or challenges. But instead of saying, how did your day go? What we say in our house is um, two questions. What went well today? And what did you learn? And so you
Mm.
see how you can't answer that's already framing the conversation for a positive conversation. And it prevents us from having a 30-minute. Now, if there are times where there was something that was absolutely horrible, yeah, you have to dive into that and be there in comfort. But so just those two questions in a daily, repetitive setting change the conversation that we're having dramatically.
I love.
Those are just two. And then if you want me to continue on, do you have thoughts on that?
Definitely, definitely. So, if you have other questions, I would really appreciate it if you would share them. But firstly, I would like to get into the first question that you mentioned, and I think this is a really good one. The one with whether the world is happening to you or so. I think this is a really good one because it actually reminds us that we have the power somehow, right?
We have a choice, we have a choice, and we have a lot more control sometimes than we give ourselves credit for. Now, there are absolutely situations where uh, you don't necessarily have immediate control, but you have control on the narrative and how you think about that situation.
I think this is really good, and especially since um, for instance, in my situation, where when I was growing up, I thought that this is the world, and I thought of the world as something fixed, like this is how it is, and I have to adapt to it. And I think this brings a really good shift in perspective in the fact that we actually are co-creators of this world and we can influence this world in a positive way. So we can create new things that weren't there before. And people that will come after us will see them and will think that this is the world and that they can also improve on it. And I think this is important as a shift in perspective. But let's get into the other questions that you wanted to mention.
Well, it's more of a framework to ask better questions. Uh, the meaningful books process, we every single page ask a question that helps somebody connect with the memory. An example of that is, let's go back. When did we first meet? And just it immediately helps someone think about that moment because they don't take the time to do it. But the framework in general, generally speaking, is a lot of time we just spend time asking questions about the present day or what happened in the moment. But if you'll take a minute and you'll reframe the conversation to think about look back in the past or look towards the future, we oftentimes forget those two directions. There's so much positive either way, or there's so much excitement potentially about things in the future. And so a question as simple as, what have you been dreaming about lately? What do you dream about? That's towards what are you excited about in the future? And that's towards the future, but that changes the mindset a little bit of just the everyday, this is what we're in right now, and shifts the perspective. And then looking back, what was the what was one of the most favorite, I don't know, meals we had together, or something, anything in the past that you can connect with that in a positive way, is something I found to be very helpful.
This is really good, and it's a great tool. I was thinking that it's a great tool for gratitude as well, because we can ask what am I grateful for, but we can also go more in depth, and we can have more imagination and creativity when it comes to asking questions that lead to gratitude. So do you have any ideas on these kinds of questions that we can ask that lead to gratitude?
I think so. I think This one is contrasting, but by my side is a prompt from one of the writing guides, and it's when were they there for you?
Mm,
Every relationship you have, there is some reason that you're endeared to that individual, whether it's a spouse, a significant other, a parent, a sibling, even children or friends. But if you think about when I was struggling, when were they there? You can immediately connect with, wow, that person was there for me. You remember how, you remember what it felt like for them to be there. So that's a question that I think can immediately spur up gratefulness for an individual in your life. Some other ones are as simple and silly as, what's a word that makes me think of that individual? And that can be, maybe it's shopping, maybe it's a certain drink they like, maybe it's a food, maybe they like to cook, but whatever that word is, it makes you connect with them and appreciate the little things about them that you aren't able to take the time to slow down and think about sometimes.
I love how this simplifies things. Like, um, of course, when you were asking the question, I was thinking about people in my life, and it's really interesting how easy it is to bring positive feelings, to bring feelings of appreciation, of like remembering positive experiences that you had together. It's This is really good, and I think that we can go into more depth on this, or we can find other kinds of questions that are related to this, that will lead to gratitude and to feeling appreciation for the people in our life, and also for our experiences. Yeah, I think this is really good. So
Yeah, yeah, I'm glad. It's That's the hardest thing to think about. Is I sit down, and that's the deep work for me. Is, what's a question that would, on a broad spectrum, help anybody connect and appreciate, and when they sat down to think about it, they would immediately be able to connect with that individual more. So
yeah, I love it. Usually when things are simple like this, it means that someone actually put in the work to simplify things. And when something is simple, it means that someone really made it simple from something that might have been complicated. And that this is mastery, from my point of view. So what do you do on a constant basis to continue to be grateful and to experience this attitude of gratitude?
absolutely, I mentioned one earlier. Is just the three things every single day. Our brains are designed from a primal state to look for fear. So if you went back to a caveman, or people in their early years, they hear a twig snap and they're always on alert. And so if we don't train ourselves to look for the positive every single day, we're not going to start doing that. And so every day I sit down, some point early in the morning, and I'll write down just three things that were a positive from the previous day. Now, Georgie, and to the listeners, that could be as simple as, I was grateful that internet worked, that I had internet. I am grateful for a car that got me to point A to point B, clean water. Um, or I was grateful that my wife made dinner. It could be super simple, but just three of those things, and it's practice, and I do the work. That would be one practice that helps me. Another one that I learned from a book called Before Happiness by Sean Achor, positive psychologist, is meaning markers. So as you're moving forward in life, it's easy to forget what you're working towards, or why you're working forward. And he says, write down what gives your life meaning and look at it. And so on my whiteboard here in my office, I have about 10 to 12 things listed out that give my life meaning, and whether that be family, whether that be having a positive impact, whether that be using the story of losing my dad to help somebody else go create a moment in their family. So those things give me meaning and help me develop that attitude of gratitude, I guess you could say.
Hmm. And you mentioned creating moments. How do we do this?
Well, I think the first thing is you have to have time. You have to have time to do it. And the really convicting thing for people is to look at your schedule. So I could ask you, what type of impact do you want to have on people? Or when you're at the end of your life, what will you want people to have said about you? And a lot of positive things will come out. But then if I ask you, show me your schedule, where are you doing those things? Where are you making sure those things, you're investing in those things right now? And look, I'm as guilty as anybody for this. You know, this is an opportunity to hopefully invest in people, but a lot of times you look at the schedule and it doesn't line up with what you want in the future. And that's okay, because a lot of us are in that boat. But to do that, we have to be intentional. We have to give it a little bit of thought and think about it. And an example that's coming to mind is, um, it took me 5 minutes to think about this and to put it on my schedule, but the impact was so much greater. So my wife and I, we had a first date at a local restaurant. And several months ago, it was 7-year anniversary of that date. So number one, I wrote down the date of the first date we went on. Number two, I scheduled it on our calendar. Hey, here's where we're going to go on this night. And even if she knew it, when we went there, it was all reflecting about, you remember when we met here, X amount of years ago, and all the things that have changed. We could have went there without knowing that it was that night, and it would have changed the perspective. It would have been a regular night. But because I spent the 5 minutes to say, hey, this is going to help us reconnect with that date, that first original date night, it really helps. So all I'm saying is that it took 5 minutes to think of it, put it on the calendar. So being intentional with that moment and really creating it is how I think you can do that, architecting those moments.
This is really good because this actually gives us reasons and ideas on what we can be grateful for, because if we are creating those moments, we can definitely go back to them and use them as fuel to go forward and to enjoy life more and to appreciate it more. So you mentioned your wife. Who are the people in your life that you are grateful for?
Oh, wow. Absolutely her. I wouldn't be the man I am without her. Um, she's such a strong woman, and she encouraged me in everything I do. And really, all the things that I've worked on wouldn't be possible without her support. So the other one would be my mom. Just having watched her go through what she went through and losing her husband, and then raising myself and my two brothers, and just the huge heart that she has, and my two brothers, and so many more people, so many friends and family members and people that go to my church, and just so grateful for so many people in my life that support me, encourage me. And I think a lot of times you can feel like you're isolated by yourself, but you're really not. And when you take the opportunity just to ask the simple question like you did, I'm so loved and I'm so grateful for all those people. They make up, uh, it's like a mosaic. They make up who I am as one, but so many of them. So just grateful for all of them.
Yeah, I can definitely relate to this. So we're almost at the end of our time together, and I want to ask you, where can our audience find you? Where can our audience see your work?
I think the easiest thing for listeners to do would be to go to maketodaymeaningful.com. That's just maketodaymeaningful.com. I have a video on there that has it's free. It's got 4 steps that can help them really do a lot of the things that we've talked about on this episode: assess, elevate, create, and finish. And all 4 of those areas help you do different things in your life that are going to help you really, I think, just make today meaningful. And they can go there or on Instagram with Connor James, with Connor James. But I'm so grateful for your time, just your time and the listeners. And again, I just really want them to go from this conversation and make that phone call, say I'm sorry to that person you have that grudge against, and just invest in relationships, because they can all change really quickly.
Lovely. I love the message, and I think it's the best way to end this interview. Thank you so much for being here with us and for sharing so much of what you are with us.
Thank you so much, George, and thank you to you and the Gratitude Podcast listeners.